ಸಂಸಾರದಾವ ನಲಲಿದಲೋಕ ತ್ರಣಯ ಕಾರುಣ್ಯ ಗಣ ಗಣತ್ವಂ ಸಂಸಾರದಾವ ನಲಲಿದಲೋಕ ತ್ರಣಯ ಕಾರುಣ್ಯ ಗಣ ಗಣತ್ವಂ ಪ್ರಾಪ್ತಸ್ಯ ಕಲ್ಯಾಣ ಗುಣರ್ನವಸ್ಯ ವಂದೇ ಗುರು ಶ್ರೀಚರಣರವಿಂದಂ ಪ್ರಾಪ್ತಸ್ಯ ಕಲ್ಯಾಣ ಗುಣರ್ನವಸ್ಯ ವಂದೇ ಗುರು ಶ್ರೀಚರಣರವಿಂದಂ महाप्रभो कीर्तन नित्य गीता वादित्रमध्यान् मनसोरसेना रोमाञ्चकम्पा श्रुतरङ्गबाजो वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणरविन्दम् श्रीविग्रहाराधन नित्यानाना सिंगारतान् मंदिरमजनादो युक्तस्य भक्तां च नियुञ्जतोऽपि वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणरविन्दम् चतुर्विधा श्री भगवत्प्रसादा स्वादाना तृप्तान् हरिभक्तसङ्गान् कृथैव तृप्तिं भजता सदैव वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणरविन्दम् श्रीराधिका माधवयो अपारा माधुर्या लीला गुणरूपनाम्नाम् प्रतीक्षणा स्वादनलोलुपास्य वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणरविन्दम् निकुञ्जयुनो रतिकेलिसिद्ध्यै यायालिभियुक्तेरपेक्षणीया मंत्रादिदाक्षात् अतिवल्लभास्य वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणरविन्दम् साक्षादरित्वेन्द समस्तशास्त्रे उक्तास्तथा भाव्यत एव साद्भिः किन्तु प्रभोजा प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणरविन्दम् यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादान्न गति कुतोऽपि भगवत्प्रसादो ध्यायान् सुवासं तस्य यशस्श्रीसन्ध्यं वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणरविन्दम् संसारदावानललितलोका त्राणाय कारुण्यगणगणत्वम् प्रतस्य कल्याणगुणर्णवस्य वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणरविन्दम् 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 नमः विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपेष्टाय भूतले श्रीमती भक्ति वेदांता स्वामिन्निति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौरा भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौरा भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौरा भक्तवृंद Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Nila Madhava Radha Nila Madhava Radhe. Jayo Jagannatha Jayo Baladeva Jayo Subhadrama Jayo Sudarshana. Jayo Sitaram, 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 Jayo Lakshmana Hanuman. Jayo Lakshmi Narasimha, Lakshmi Narasimha, Jayo Lakshmi Narasimha, Jayo Lakshmi Narasimha, Lakshmi Narasimha, Jayo Lakshmi Narasimha, Jayo Lakshmi Narasimha, Jayo Lakshmi Narasimha, Jayo Gauranitai, Jayo Gauranitai, Jayo Gauranitai, Jayo Gauranitai. Gauranitai Jayo, Gauranitai Jayo, Gauranitai Jayo, Gauranitai Jayo Prabhupada Jayo, Prabhupada Jayo, Prabhupada Jayo, Prabhupada. Jayo Guru Deva Jayo, Guru Deva Jayo, Guru Deva Jayo, Guru Deva. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
Ananda Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai, Nama Acharya Srila Haridasa Ki Jai, Pramise Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shadvaita Tata Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Ki Jai, Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Ayodhya Dham Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Yamuna Mai Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhaktavinda Ki Jai. All glory to assembled devotees, all glory to assembled devotees, all glory to assembled devotees, all glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga, all glory to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Namaste Narasimhaya, Namaste Narasimhaya, Praladaladaine, Praladaladaine, Hiranyakashipurvachaha, Shilantankanakalaye, Ito Narsimho Parato Narsimho, Yato Yato Yami Tato Narsimho, Yato Yato Yami Tato Narsimho, Vahe Narsimho Hirdaye Narsimho, Narasimhamadim Saranam Prapate, Tavakara Kamalavare Nakam Abhuta Simha Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanuvrinda Keshavatirtha Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadish Hare, Jai Jagadish Hare, Jai Jagadish Hare. Keshavatirtha Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadish Hare, Jai Jagadish Hare, Jai Jagadish Hare. Jai
सत्यवत्याय नमो नमः वृंदाय तुलसीदेवाय प्रियाय केशवसच विष्णुभक्तिपदे देवी सत्यवत्याय नमो नमः वृंदाय तुलसीदेवाय प्रियाय केशवसच विष्णुभक्तिपदे देवी सत्यवत्याय नमो नमः वृंदादेवी तुलसी महाराज की जय।
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रियसी नमो नमः राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो यही अभिलाषी राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो यही अभिलाषी जे तुम्हार शरण लोय तारा वंश पूर्ण होय कृपा कोरी करो तारे वृंदावन बासी मोरा ये अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो वास नयने हेरी भो सदा जुगल रूप रासी यही निवेदन धरो साखीर अनुगत करो सेवाधिकार दिए करो निज दासी दीन कृष्ण दासे कोई यही न मोरा होय श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा जन पासी श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा जन पासी यानि कानि च पापानि प्रमाहत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि प्रमाद्यधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रनश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे। यानि कानि च पापानि प्रमाद्यधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी। जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी। जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद। जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव। नित्य गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल। वृंदे देवी तुलसी देवी महारानी की जय। श्री वृंदाय तुलसी देव्याय प्रियाय केशवश्च च विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवी सत्यव्रताय नमो नमः। श्री वृंदाय तुलसी देव्याय प्रियाय केशवश्च च विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवी सत्यव्रताय नमो नमः। श्रीवृन्दाय तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवश्च च कृष्णभक्तिप्रदे देवी सत्यव्रताय नमो नमः। वृंदे देवी तुलसी देवी महारानी की जय।
O Tulsi, beloved of Krishna, I bow down before you again and again. My desire is to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of his wishes fulfilled, bestow mercy upon him and make him a resident of Vrindavana. My desire is that he also grant me residence in the pleasure go to Shri Vrindavana town. Thus within my vision I shall behold the beautiful paths of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of Kara Damsel's birthday. Please give me the privilege of devotional service. This very fallen lowly son of Krishna praise. May I always swim in the love of Shri Radha and Govinda. Tulsi Maharani ki jai. There are 10 fences in the matter chanting holy name that should be avoided, and they are as follows. 1. To blaspheme the devotees who have dedicated lives for the propagation of the name of the Lord. 2. To consider names of demigods like Lord Shiva, Brahma, to be equal to the independent name Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the orders of spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic literature or to in pursuing Vedic versions. 5. To consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation to the name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activity on the strength of chanting the holy name. 8. To consider chanting Hare Krishna one of the auspicious ritualistic activities, offering the Vedas as fruit activities, karma, kanda. 9. To instruct a faceless person about the glory of holy name. 10. To not have complete faith in the chanting holy name, and to maintain material attachments even after spending so many instructions on this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to Vaishnava must have regard against these 10 offenses. In order to achieve desired success, Krishna being knowledge as the most humble witnesses of all the Vaishnava devotees of all. Shri Chaitanya Shastakam ki Jeto Darpanamartinam Bhavamahadavagni Nirvapanam Shriya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam Vidyavatu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratipadam Purnarmita Sarvatmasnapadam Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Bodha Nija Sarva Saktis Itra Pita Smaranena Kala Etadrishi Tava Krupa Bhagavan Mamapi Durdaivam Idrisham Iha Janina Anuragaha Trinadapi Sunichena Tarorapi Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari Nadanam Najanam Nasundarim Kavitam Va Jagadisha Kamaye Vachanmani Janmamishware Bhavatad Bhaktirahaitu Twai Ainandatanuja Kinkaram Patitamam Vishame Bhavam Budau Krupaya Tava Pada Pankaja Stitaduli Sadrisham Vichintaya Nayanam Galadashrudaraya Vadanam Gadgadarudaya Gira Pilakir Nichitam Vapu Kada Tavanama Grahani Bhavishyati Yugaitam Nimeshena Chakshusha Pravarshayitam Shunyaitam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Virahena me Asliyavapādaratam pinastu mam Adarshanam marmahatam karotu va Yata tata va vidadatu lampato Matprananatastu sayevana para Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtana.
which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtana movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which you are always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone content of all beneficent to liver thus you hundreds and millions of names of Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names. But I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service birth after birth. O Son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. At some or other I fall into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from the ocean of death and run of the atoms into your lotus feet. O in my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name. When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand on at the recitation of your O Govinda? Feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and he shall remain so even if he unveils me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipped Lord unconditionally. See, Chaitanya.
Shri Guru Pranama prayers ki jai. Ishwara Om
ज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य
Ganyatimirandasya
ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया
Gyananjanashalakaya
चक्षुरुन्मिलितं
Chakshurunmilitam
येन
Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri
चैतन्यमनोभीष्टं
Chaitanyamanovistam
स्थापितं
Sapitam
येन
Yena Bhutali
स्वयं
Swayam
रूपा
Rupa
कदा
Kadama
मह्यं
Yam
ददाति
Dadati
स्म
Sma
पदान्तिकं
Padantikam
वन्देऽहं
Bandeham Shri
श्रीगुरुं
Guru Shri Jataha
श्रीयुतपदकमलं
Chikam Shri Gurun
श्रीगुरुं
Vaishnavam Sha Shri
श्रीरूपं
Rupam
साग्रजातं
Sagrajatam
सहगण
Sahagana
रघुनाथान्वितं
Raghunatan
तं
Vitam Tam
सजीवं
Sajivam
साद्वैतं
Saivaitam
सावधूतं
Savadutam Parijana
परिजनसहितं
Sahitam Krishna
कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं
Chaitanya Devam Shri
श्रीराधा
Radha Krishna
कृष्णपादां
Padan
सहगण
Sahaguna
ललिता
Lalita Shri
श्रीविशाखान्वितां
Vishakanitam
च
Sha
कृष्णपदाय
Bhutaya Krishna
कृष्णपृष्ठाय
Prasthaya
भूतले
Bhutale
श्रीमते
Shimate
भक्तिसिद्धान्त सरस्वती इति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे नमो
Om
विष्णुपदाय
Vishnupadaya Krishna
कृष्णपृष्ठाय
Prasthaya
भूतले
Bhutale
श्रीमते
Shimate Bhakti
भक्तिसिद्धान्त
Siddhanta
सरस्वती
Saraswati
इति
Namine
नामिने
Shiva
श्रीवशवानवी
Shivanavi
देवी
Devi
दयितया
Dayitaya
कृपाब्धये
Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vigyana
कृष्णसम्बन्धविज्ञानदायिने
Dayane
प्रभवे
Prabhuve
नमः
Namaha Madhur Ujvala
मधुरोज्ज्वलप्रेमाद्य
Premadya Shri Rupanuga
श्रीरूपनुगभक्तिदा
Bhakti
श्री
Shri Guru Karuna Shakti
शक्तिविग्रहाय
Vigrahaya
नमोस्तुते
Namostute
नमस्ते
Namaste
गौरवाणी
Gauravani Shri
श्रीमूर्तये
Murtaye
जगत्तारिणे
Jagatarine
रूपरूप
Rupanuga
विरूपसिद्धान्तद्वन्द्वहारिणे नमो गौरकिशोराय साक्षात् वैराग्यमूर्तये
Vipralambara
विप्रलम्बर
Sambodhe
पदे
Padam
भुजाय
Pujayate
नमः
Namaha
नमो
Namo
भक्तविनोदाय सच्चिदानन्दनामिने
Namine Guru Shakti
गौरशक्तिस्वरूपाय
Swarupaya Rupanuga
पुरन्दरायते
Urayate Guru Vir Baba
गौरवमेस्त्वं
Pramistwam
नित्येश
Nirdesta Sajjana
सज्जनप्रिय
Priya Vaishnava
वैष्णवशर्वभौमा
Sarvabhuma Sri
श्रीजगन्नाथाय ते
Jagannathayate
नमः
Namaha
वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च
Vanchakapatarubhyascha
कृपा
Kripa
सिन्धुभ्य एव च
Sindhubhyevacha
पतितानां
Patitanam
पावनेभ्यो
Pavanebhyo
वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो
Vaishnavebhyo
नमः
Namo Namaha
नमो
Namo
महावदन्याय
Mahavadanyaya
कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय
Krishna Chaitanya
कृष्णचैतन्यनाम्ने
Namne Guru
गौरद्विषे
Chase
नमः
Namaha
पञ्चतत्त्वं विष्णुं
Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa
भक्तरूपस्वरूपकं
Sindhubhyevcha
भक्तावतारं
Bhaktavam
भक्ताख्यं
Bhaktakam Namami
भक्तशक्तिकम्
Bhaktak Saktikam
हे
Hey
कृष्ण
Krishna
करुणा
Karuna
सिन्धु
Sindhu
दीनबन्धो
Dinabandhu
जगत्पते
Jagatpate
गोपेश
Gopisha
गोपिकान्ता
Gopika
राधाकान्ता
Bhakanta
नमोऽस्तुते
Karostate
जयत्वं सुरतौ पङ्गोर्मम मन्दमतिर्गतिः
Mandamatirgati
मत्सर्वसम्भवो
Matsarvasvapadam Bojo Radha Madana
राधामदनमोहनः
Mohano Divya Vindaranya Kalpatamadha Shimad Ratnagara Simhasanas Deva Shimad Radha Shila Govinda Deva Vastali Seva Myana Smarami Shiman Rasa Rasa Rambivam Siva Tatatastita Karsan Venuswanir Gopir Gopinatar Sriyesnana Tapta Kanchana Korangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanustate Devi Pranamami Hari Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Brahmasamita Ishwara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Nadiradi Govinda Sarvakarma Karana Chintamani Prakara Sadma Sukalpa Vriksha Laksha Priteshu Surabhira Vipaliyantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambram Sevimanam Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Kanantam Aravinda Taksham Bharavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarankam Kandarpa Kopikani Avisesa Sobam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Vajami Yangani Yasya Sakalendriya Viddimanti Pasyanti Panti Kayanti Chiram Chaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrasya Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Vajami Advaitam Achutam Anadim Ananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navyovanam Cha Vede Sudurlabam Adurlabam Atma Bhakto Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastakoti Satavatsara Sampragam Yovayuratapi Manasomani Pungamanam Sopyasti Yat Prapadasimya Vichintya Tatve Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Saitram Jagaranta Kotyam Yaschaktirasti Jagaranta Chaya Yadanta Dantarasta Paramanu Chayantarasta Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Bhava Bhavita Diyomana Jastataiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanyana Bhusa Suktarya Meva Nigama Pratidhai Sutavanti Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Sarpati Bhavita Vista Virya Evani Jirupa Dayakalabi Goloka Evani Visata Kilapa Bhutta Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santaksa Deva Hidesu Vilokyanti Yam Sham Sundaram Chintan Gunaswarupa Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Krishna is known as Govinda in the Supreme, is the Supreme Godhead. He has an eternal, blissful, spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, and he is the prime cause of all causes. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor, who is tending the house, yielding all desire in abodes built with spiritual gems. Surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis, I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute, and with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head decked with peacock feather, with the figure of beauty tinged with the hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, round whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers, beautified with the moon locket, whose two hands are adorned with the flute and jeweled ornaments, who always revels in pastimes of love, whose graceful threefold bending form of Shyam Sundar is eternally manifest. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of that transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of all the organs, and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is inaccessible to the Vedas, but obtainable by pure, unalloyed devotion of the soul, who is without a second, who is not subject to decay, is without a beginning, whose form is endless, who is the beginning and the eternal Purusha, yet he is a person possessing the beauty of blooming youth. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, only the tip of the toe of whose lotus feet is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayama by drilling respiration, or by jnanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane extending over thousands of millions of years. He is an undifferentiated entity, as there is no distinction between potency and the possessor thereof, and his work of creation of millions of worlds. His potency remains inseparable. All the universes exist in him, and he is present in his fullness in every one of the atoms that are scattered throughout the universe at one and the same time. Such is the primeval Lord whom I adore. I adore the same Govinda, the primeval Lord, in whose praise men who are imbued with devotion sing the mantra suktas told by the Vedas. By gaining their appropriate beauty, greatness, thrones, conveyances, and ornaments, I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, residing in his own realm, Goloka, with Radha, resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of the ecstatic potency possessed of 64 artistic activities, in the company of the confidant Saktis, embodiments of the extensions of her bodily form, permeated and vitalized by his ever-blissful spiritual rasa. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Shyam Sundar, Krishna himself, with inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts, with the eye of devotion, tinged with the salve of love. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who has manifested himself personally as Krishna and the different avatars in the world in the forms of Rama, Nishinga, Vamana, etc., as a subjective portion. Sri Brahma Samhita Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavana Ki Jai, Gaura Premanandi, Hari Bol. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Namah Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vastaya Bhutali Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tanami Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Pachanini Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskati Desatarne Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Okay, so today we're going to finish how Hinduism deviated from Vedic Dharma. And first and foremost, by the Mayavad philosophy or impersonalism, Kevala Advaita, and the cancel culture of impersonalism. The Mayavadis, they cancel the material world, the existence of jivas, the Vaikuntha and Goloka, and they also cancel Krishna and all the residents of Vaikuntha and Goloka, and also directly insult Krishna himself. So they are the worst of the worst, worse than the atheists. The atheists are already really bad. Mayavadis are even worse because they directly, specifically insult Krishna on a regular basis. And one example is that of the Brahma Kumaris, and there are many others, different categories of Mayavadis. Okay, second point is the false practice of the Hindu caste system. Now, we covered this already, but I'm going over it. And so we have to read the Bhagavad Gita, 4th chapter, 13th verse, Chaturanya Maya Sistam Gunakarma Vibhagasa, in which it says, Krishna says, in the beginning of time, I established the 4 varnas, the social castes, and the 4 ashramas, the spiritual divisions. So, because Krishna created that, it cannot be changed and it cannot be stopped. And the example of that is the Soviet Union. They tried to stop classification of people. They wanted only one class. But they failed after 80 plus years of communism in the Soviet Union. They never really reached pure communism. They had a hybrid socialist communist state. They were not able to attain pure communism. And they were not able to eliminate the 4 classes. They ended up with 4 classes, even though they did everything to have only one class. And that would be the workers. Because ultimately, in a pure Soviet state, the workers are the owners of everything. So that they never achieved pure communism, and they were never able to destroy the 4 classifications, because Krishna has established this, and it's impossible to stop. So it says, since 1917, the Soviet Union has transformed itself from a predominantly agricultural, rural, and developing capitalist society into an industrial, urban, socialist society. Its social structure developed from the imposition of a centralist Marxist state on a geographically, ethnically, and culturally diverse population. Western sociologists generally categorize Soviet society into 4 major socio-occupational groupings. This is after 80 years of communism, where they tried to destroy the 4 classes, just have one class. They ended up with 4 classes again. Western sociologists generally categorized Soviet society into 4 major socio-occupational groupings: the political governmental elite and cultural and scientific intelligentsia. That's 1. In other words, intelligent people, or the Brahmana types, plus the low-class political government elite. That's the first class. Second class, white-collar workers. Those were workers who were managing factories. They didn't own them. Nobody was allowed to own anything. But they were the managers. And then the blue-collar workers, those were the workers. But there's 2 levels of these workers. The ones that work in the factories, and then the second type of worker or the fourth class, is the peasants and other agricultural workers. Soviet ideology held that the Soviet society consisted solely of two non-antagonistic classes, workers and peasants. Those engaged in non-manual labor, like bookkeepers to party functionaries, formed strata in both classes. So they tried to have only two classes. They couldn't get one class, so they tried to have two, but it ended up into four. The elite members of the Communist Party, along with scientists and intelligent people, one. Two, the white-collar workers, the managers of the factories, and the farms. They had to have managers. Then number three would be the blue-collar workers, and number four were the peasants and the farmers. The social position was determined not only by occupation, but also by education, party membership, place of residence, and even nationality. Membership in the ruling group, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, aided career advancement. Those who worked full-time for the party received political power, special privileges, and financial benefits. Social status increased the higher one was promoted in this party, but this power was derived from position and could neither be inherited or from nor be bequeathed to relatives. Unlike in the West, private property played no role in social stratification, and income generally was a consequence of social position, not its determinant. In general, the higher the social position, the greater the pay, benefits, access to scarce goods and services, and prestige. So you see, there were four classes. They're a little bit different than the four Chaturvanya Maya system, but there were four, and they could not stop it, although they tried their best. So we see whatever Krishna has established cannot be changed. And but people today still don't believe that. Like, for example, it's impossible to do something to proliferate living in the body. You can do anything you want. It's not going to work. The body is destined to die in 100 years or a little bit more than that. But yet they're trying to do that. Number two, they're trying to go to the moon or to Mars or to other planets. They'll never be able to do that successfully because each one of these planets is inhabited by superior living entities. And therefore, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be possible. You can't even go from India to the United States without having a visa, right? So how are they going to go to another planet that's controlled by superior beings? It's not possible. Okay, so the second point of deviation is the false caste system. And then, and it was because the Brahmanas changed one word of the Shastra, Chaturvanya Maya system, guna karma. So guna karma was the criterion. It's qualification, and it's basically educational qualification and work. But they changed it to birth, janma karma, because the Brahmanas in Kali Yuga wanted their children to inherit all their benefits. And they didn't care about whether the children were qualified or not qualified. So you end up with a lot of unqualified so-called Brahmanas that have never been trained properly. And all they do is mostly perform some yagyas for material benefit. So that whole thing is false. And then number three deviation from Vedic Dharma are man gods, false so-called incarnations masquerading as God. And there's so many of them. I have a full list of them. I'll bring it tomorrow. Number four is the performance of Vedic ritualistic ceremonies for material benefits, or karma kanda. And this is completely rejected by Krishna in the 18th chapter, 6th and 7th verse, which you've already read that previous couple of days. Number 5 is karma yoga and mystic yoga, or Ashtanga yoga, adulterated by material desires such as elevation to heavenly planets in the material universe, or enhanced sense gratification by mystic powers or siddhis. Okay, so there are basically 4 levels of devotional of advancement spiritually. 1 is called karma kanda, 2 is called jnana kanda, 3 is called the mystic yogi or Ashtanga yoga, and then 4 is called bhakti yoga. So karma yoga, jnana yoga, Ashtanga yoga, and bhakti yoga. So the karma yoga, jnana yoga, and Ashtanga yoga all have material desires. The karma yogi wants to be elevated to the higher material planets where there's much more enjoyment, material sense gratification. The jnana yogi wants to be liberated in the impersonal Brahman, and the Ashtanga yogis want to develop the yoga siddhis to have tremendous amount of power and fame and wealth and so forth. But the bhakti yoga simply wants to please Krishna, the pure bhakti yoga. There is something called karma mishra bhakti, or jnana mishra bhakti, or Ashtanga mishra bhakti. That is when bhakti is mixed with this karma, jnana, or Ashtanga, or mystic yoga. So that's not pure devotional service. When it's pure devotional service, then one is elevated to the top of the yoga ladder, and one is transcends the influence of the modes of material nature, and is basically liberated even in this world. Iha yasya harir dasya karmana manasad jiva akilasvat avasta su jivan mukta sa uchyate. So one becomes jivan mukta even in this body, even in the material world, when they dedicate everything, their intelligence, their words, their body, their mind, and their service in the service of Krishna. They become liberated even in this world, even in the material body. So that is the position of a pure bhakta. Okay, so now number 6. The false concept that service to mankind is service to God, or manava seva is madhava seva. It's just the opposite. Service to God is service to man, is service to mankind. But they turn it around and they say, if you serve Durija Narayana, that's serving God. So that's false. And many, even Vaishnavas, endorse this manava seva is madhava seva. So that's another false concept. And then number 7, the idea that all religions are equal and that one can reach God by any path. This was something that was publicized by Gandhi. Of course, the Muslims didn't accept it, and just a bunch of hodgepodge Hindus accepted this idea, and it was instrumental in destroying and diluting down the purity of Hinduism. The idea that all religions are equal and that one can reach God by any path. Well, what does Krishna say? Bhaktya mam abhijananti yavanyas tasmi tatvata tatvamam tatvato yadva vishite tat anantaram. 18th chapter, 54th verse. Let's take a look at that. 18th chapter, 54th verse. What does it say? It says, Krishna says, 55th verse. I'm sorry. One can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of me, by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. So they're directly rejecting what Krishna says and making something up that's false. That is, all religions are equal, And you can take any path you want, and it'll lead to God. Okay. So, it's very important that. Now we went over this before. I'm just recapitulating. Okay, then number 8, the Mammonist concept of life, purporting that the goal of life is work hard and enjoy sense gratification. So what does Mammonist mean? This is a term from the Bible. It means one who's devoted to the ideal or pursuit of wealth. So people think, work really hard, make a lot of money, then spend that money on sense gratification and enjoy life. And this is completely false. Okay, so we covered up to this point. So now we're going to cover the rest. Point 9, the belief that one can understand God by mental speculation, logic, reason, and scientific research. Well, this is what the modern scientists and philosophers believe, that you can attain knowledge by scientific research. So scientific research means you have an idea, you do some experimentation, and you try and see if there's any pattern. Based on that pattern, you make a theory, and if that theory has some predictability, it's accepted as a scientific theory. It's not fact, but theory. In order to be a fact, it has to have 100% predictability. Right? Just like if you say, every man is mortal. John is a man. John is mortal. That has 100% predictability. Okay. So now you can say, instead of John, you can say Bill, Ed, Joe. It's all going to be the same thing. They're all going to be born. Eventually, they're going to die. Right? So that predictability is 100%. So that's called a fact. Now, the scientific theories, they're not 100%. Some of them are 10%, some of them are 20% predictability, some are 50% predictability. So when you get close to 50% predictability, it's considered a scientific theory. But it's still a theory, it's not 100% fact. Right? So most of science is theories, right? And as they experiment more and they get finer instruments for experimentation, they keep changing the theories. So you see there was Newton's laws of material nature. That held for about 500 years. And then they came out with quantum theory to explain the movement of particles that are microscopic at the speed of light, because Newton's laws of mechanics did not work for microscopic particles at the speed of light. So they had to come up with a different theory about that, called quantum theory or whatever. So here we see the scientists' theories are always changing or evolving, because they're just theories, they're not actual facts. They have some predictability, but not 100%. Like, for example, there is 100% predictability of birth, death, old age, and disease. That's a fact. Right? You can't argue with it. And, but the fact that, the theory that you can go and establish communities on the moon or Mars, that's a theory. It's not a fact. And until they actually do it, it might be a fact. But they haven't done it after 60 years after they went to the moon. They still haven't done it. They're still talking about doing it. Okay, so then, so this idea or belief that one can understand God by mental speculation, logic, reason, and scientific research, this is completely false. There's no possibility of understanding God by any of those means. It's only by Bhakti-Amam Abhijananti, 1855, or 1154. Let's look at 1154, Bhagavad Gita 1154. It says, 1154 says, Bhaktyamam abhijananti yavanyastasmi tattvato tattvato gyatva vishitetat anantaram. My dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am, standing before you, and can thus be seen directly. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of my understanding. So there you have two verses, 1154, 1855. Krishna is emphatically saying there's only one way to understand him. That's through devotional service, not by speculation, not by logic, not by reason, not by scientific research. Okay, so number 10. These are 18 points of deviation from Vedic Dharma by Hinduism. 10. Demigod worship with the misconception that all gods are equal. So demigod worship is not recommended by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Or if one has no knowledge of Krishna consciousness, then demigod worship can be useful to help people. Why? Because at least by worshiping the demigods, you accept that there's someone superior to you. So in that sense, it's like it can be a stepping stone to higher understanding. But when you say all gods are equal, you can take any path you want, you'll reach the supreme goal, that is completely wrong. That's what the Hindus say, or many of them say. So that is completely wrong. But if a person does not know anything about Krishna and takes up demigod worship, it can be useful because at least they're accepting as someone superior to them. Right? But it's only will work if you have a bona fide guru. If you don't have a bona fide guru, he's not going to teach you that there's something better than a demigod. He's going to teach you that, all the gods are equal, you see. So it only works if you have a bona fide guru and he can gradually help the disciple go from one step to another and then finally reach pure devotional service. So the demigod worship with the misconception that all gods are equal, that's another bogus idea that has entered into Hinduism. And this is also explained in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verse number Kamaistaistar hitagyana prapadyante nya devata. So let's see. Tam tam niyamam astaya pakrityan hitaksvaya. Those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires surrender unto demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own nature. Yo yo yam yam tanum bhakta shradayarchitam ichyati tasya tasya chalam shradham tam eva vidadam yaham. This is 721. I am in everyone's heart as a supersoul. As soon as one desires to worship some demigod, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to that particular deity. Sataya shradaya yuktas tasya radhanam ihate labbate cha tata kamam hayaiva vihitan hitan. Endowed with such a faith, he endeavors to worship a particular demigod and obtains his desires, meaning material desires. But in actuality, these benefits are bestowed by me alone. And then antavat tu phalam te sam tad bhavati alpamedasam devan deva yajo yanti mad bhakta yanti mam api. Men of small intelligence worship the demigods, and their fruits are limited and temporary. Those who worship demigods go to the planets of the demigods, but my devotees ultimately reach my supreme planet. So, this is all based on ignorance and being attracted by false brahmanas who make money by doing materialistic rituals, such as worshiping the demigods for material benefit. So Krishna doesn't recommend it at all, but like I said, if you have a bona fide guru and he gradually brings you up from demigod worship to worshiping Krishna, that works. But just having a family guru who's only interested in performing yajnas to make money, that doesn't work. And one will become, let's say, stuck in the process of birth and death, because you can't go back to Godhead as long as you have material desires. Okay, so this demigod worship with the misconception that all gods are equal. Okay, then number 11, the acceptance of Western pedagogy or atheistic humanism for the teaching method in India as well as in the West. So, this atheistic humanism or Western pedagogy. Pedagogy means how you organize teaching. So, the way they organize teaching is to reject the existence of God completely. And the first thing that happens when kids get into a middle school or high school, the teacher explains that we cannot verify the existence of God by scientific research. Therefore, we don't talk about God. So that they explain that to the kids in the advanced classes in high school. And they say, we don't talk about God because we can't prove that God exists through scientific research. So for us, it's not a reality. If you believe in God and it makes you feel good, okay, that's your problem. It's not our problem. But we don't waste our time talking about God in the school. And that's in all the public schools, right? So this acceptance of this Western pedagogy, the way of teaching in the West, including India and other countries around the world, and it's called atheistic humanism. Humanism means you're only interested in human beings, you're not interested in God. Right? So basically it's atheistic. Okay, so that doesn't work. That's another bogus theory. And it's entered into Hinduism. Right? Of course, you say, well, what do you mean? I mean, Hindus worship demigods, so they're worshiping something. Yeah, but their idea of the demigod is the Mayavad idea. And Prabhupada gives the example. Let's say you want to go to the second floor of a building, so you get a ladder, you climb up the ladder to the second floor, you get into the window on the second floor, and then you throw the ladder away. So that's exactly what they're doing. They'll follow this demigod worship until they achieve their material desires, and then they stop making any more advancement. What they want is not God. They want sense gratification on the higher planets. So they use any means possible to get up to the Devalokas, and then that's it. They end up there, and then they fall down again. So that's explained in Bhagavad Gita in the 9th chapter. Let's take a look at that. 9th chapter, verse number. One second. Try vita somapa putrapapa yajna istva swargatim partayante. Those who study the Vedas and drink the Soma juice, seeking the heavenly planets, worship me indirectly, purified of sinful reactions. They take birth on the pious heavenly planet of Indra, where they enjoy godly delights. Te tam bukva swargalokam vishalam shinhe punye martilokam vishanti. When they have thus enjoyed vast heavenly sense pleasure, and the results of their pious activities are exhausted, they return to this mortal planet again. Thus, those who seek sense enjoyment by adhering to the principles of the three Vedas, Rig, Yajur, and the Rig, Sama, and Yajurveda, achieve only repeated birth and death. That's it. It's called the Ferris wheel syndrome. Now you know what a Ferris wheel is, right? It goes around like that. So sometimes they're on the bottom, like in Patala, and sometimes they're on the top, the heavenly planets, Indraloka. And so they're just going up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down in the material world over and over and over and over again. And that's called the Ferris wheel syndrome. They're stuck in it because they can't get rid of the desire for sense gratification. Prabhupada writes, one who is promoted to the higher planetary systems enjoys a longer duration of life and better facilities for sense enjoyment, yet one is not allowed to stay there forever. One is again sent back to the earth upon finishing the resultant fruits of pious activities. He who has not attained perfection of knowledge, as indicated in the Vedanta Sutra, Janmadasayata, or in other words, he who fails to understand Krishna, the cause of all causes, becomes baffled about achieving the ultimate goal of life and is thus subjected to the routine of being promoted to the higher planets and then again coming down as if situated on a Ferris wheel which sometimes goes up and sometimes comes down. The purport is that instead of being elevated to the spiritual world from which there is no longer any possibility of coming down, one simply revolves in the cycle of birth and death on the higher and lower planetary systems. One should better take to the spiritual world to enjoy an eternal life full of bliss and knowledge, and never return to this miserable material existence. There you go. So this is the problem of the demigod worship, and it's
Verse number, Maharaj.
the false concept. It's the acceptance of Western pedagogy or atheistic humanism for teaching method in India. It's related to both the demigod worship, 10 and 11. Oh, the verse number. This is 9th chapter, 21st verse. And then previous one was the 7th chapter, verses
20, 21,
20 to 23.
23.
Okay, next. The false concept of Daridya Narayana and Harijan, rubber stamping of people without real vetting or training. So this was one of Gandhi's favorite things to do. He rubber stamped the Daridya Narayana and Harijan, especially Harijans, and he calling some lower class people Harijans, the progeny of Lord Hari, but they didn't really help them spiritually. He just gave them certain rights without giving them spiritual instruction. So that's an artificial thing. It's not real. So, and then Daridya Narayana, in other words, when you meet a poor person on the street begging, it's actually God Himself, and you should give him money and whatever. So these are false concepts that have entered into Hinduism. They're not based on training people, they're based on rubber stamping people. Just like if I put a stamp on your forehead, you are Daridya Narayana. So then people go, oh, he's Daridya Narayana, we have to give him money, we have to give him this, we have to give him that. So that doesn't help the person. You have to give them training in how to become Krishna conscious. Then you help them. Education. Right? So that's another false concept that's entered into Hinduism. And then 13, the belief that industrialization, technology, economic development will evolve the country to prosperity and advance national security by production of atomic bombs, intercontinental rockets, and nuclear weapons, etc. Well, this is not true. This is a false narrative. This is what Trump believed, that by improving the economy of the United States, he would get elected over and over again. But one little virus defeated him. See, so it's not a fact. That virus, in 2 weeks, his whole economy that he had built up in 2 years that he was successful, failed. And he wasn't elected again. You know? So you cannot, this belief that industrialization, technology, economic development would evolve the country to prosperity and advance national security by production of atomic bombs, intercontinental rockets with nuclear weapons, etc. This is a false narrative. It's nonsense. But yet, Nehru and Tata and so many people, even Modi, is promoting technology, industrialization, economic development to evolve the country and to make it prosperous. In the meantime, it's ruining Vedic Dharma. And it's not the real technology. The real technology is explained in Bhagavad Gita, verses, chapter 3, verses 10 to 12. That's real. That's the real secret to prosperity in society, which was understood in previous times in India. That's why India was the richest country in the world. But it's not understood today. Everyone thinks it's industrialization, technology, economic development. By the way, just yesterday, again, you look it up right now. Most IT jobs and AI jobs are going to be eliminated once AI takes over in the next 5 to 10 years. It was in the news again yesterday, big headline. 80% of jobs are going to be eliminated by artificial intelligence. And you see it? Look up, 80% of AI jobs will be eliminated by artificial intelligence. Do you see it? Yeah. What's it say? So all your kids that are studying to be IT people, by the time they get their degree, there won't be any jobs for them. All those jobs will be taken. They're going to have to be retrained to do something else. Go ahead.
Yeah, 80% of IT jobs can be replaced by automation, and it's exciting.
And it's what?
Exciting.
What?
Exciting.
Can you spell that word?
Yeah, EXCITING. Exciting. Yeah. So.
I don't understand.
Yeah. Basically, they. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, who's excited about it? The people that.
The people. Yeah.
Can you read it again slowly? So
Okay.
I can hear.
That's a title from that Futurism website.
No, I know. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's 80% of IT jobs can be replaced by automation, and it's exciting.
And it's exciting.
Yeah.
Okay. For the CEO.
Yeah, that's just ended there.
But is it exciting for the people that lose their jobs? This is nonsense. How can you write such a thing? It's mean to write something like that.
So
it's exciting to see 80% of the workforce lose their jobs. That's complete nonsense. I'm going to read tomorrow or the next day this lecture by Prabhupada where he says, real good management means everybody is employed. They're going the opposite way. They're excited by laying off everyone. This is complete nonsense. They're going to completely destroy culture, the whole culture of the country or the world, by laying off massive numbers of people. You don't advance society by laying people off. You advance by everyone having a job and having a way of making a living. How are they going to make a living if they all lose their jobs?
They're saying, amidst the anxious grumbling of his audience at last week's Structure Conference in San Francisco, billionaire Vinod Khosla asserted that
another Indian.
Yeah, that 80%
another nonsense Indian.
that 80% of jobs in at IT department could be replaced by AI type systems. I think that's exciting, added Khosla, founder of Sun Microsystems and Silicon Valley venture firm Khosla Ventures. That, of course, is an odd statement to make about job loss.
Khosla the Sudra was happy to hear that 80% of IT jobs are going to be lost. This is nonsense. Send me that. I want to. You see how this nonsense is being proliferated as if it's something good. It's not good at all. It's going to ruin people's lives. How are you going to pay your mortgage? How are you going to go to Costco and buy something if you don't have a job? Right? You go from $180,000 a year to zero overnight. So how are you going to maintain yourself? How are you going to maintain your family? It's nonsense. Okay. So the belief that industrialization, technology, economic development will evolve the country to prosperity and advance national security by production of atomic bombs, intercontinental rockets, and nuclear weapons. All bogus nonsense. Okay, number 14. The belief that by philosophical speculation one can understand this world and the meaning of life. This is called the ascending process of knowledge. Okay, so you have two things. You have avaroha and aroha. So aroha means the ascending type of knowledge. So that's what bogus, what's the name of that guy?
Khosla.
Yeah, that's like bogus people like Khosla. They believe that by scientific research and speculation and developing atom bombs and AI, that this is going to save humanity. No, it's not going to save humanity. It's going to destroy it, right? So that's called the ascending type of knowledge. So that's not accepted by devotees. Devotees accept avaroha, the descending type of knowledge, coming from a perfect source, Krishna, and like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, everybody today is studying aroha, the ascending, inductive process. You see something, you study it, you do some experimentation, you see some type of a recurring pattern, and based on that recurring pattern, you make a theory, and but you have to prove your theory by experimentation. Like, for example, the Big Bang. There's never been any proof about the Big Bang. It's just, it's a theory without experimentation, because who's going to experiment? You're going to go and make a Big Bang and die, right, immediately, right? So it's not even a theory. It's just speculation, because for it to be a theory, they have to do experimentation and show that there's some foundation to their theory, right? You just make up a theory with no experimentation proving it, so that's also Darwinism. There's no experimentation that's proving their theory that the original amoeba, one-celled living entity, evolved from matter. Do the experiment, prove it. And they said, well, no, it happened in the past, and it'll happen in the future, but we can't do it right now. That's not science. Science, you have to do the experiment to prove it. They haven't done that in experiment. They haven't shown how the first amoeba developed from a protein soup on the North Pole or the South Pole or who knows where. So you see, this is all nonsense. It's not science. Science is observation, experimentation, theory. Okay, so the idea that by philosophical speculation one can understand this world and the meaning of life. This is called the ascending process of knowledge, or aroha. So all the knowledge that kids are learning today in schools is by the ascending process. It's all based on speculation. There's very little proof. Is there any proof that you have a monkey in your family if you go back far enough? No. Is there any proof that the Big Bang produced an organized universe? No. There's no proof of it. There's no experiment that they've done to show that that happens. Is there any proof that the original single-cell living entity happened by being zapped by lightning at the North Pole to a protein soup? How did the protein soup get on the North Pole anyway? You know, it's all a bunch of nonsense, right? It's not science. See? And many things that they're teaching in school today have never been validated by scientific research. But still they're teaching it as if it's science. See? We're all gonna go to the Mars. What? Who's gonna go to Mars? And anybody who goes there is not coming back, and they're not going to live there. They're going to die there, right? So these all nonsense ideas, but yet they're teaching it like it's science, right? Okay. Then next, number 15, the belief that there is no absolute truth and that everything is relative. So let's go back 1 minute. The aroha is the ascending inductive process. What does inductive mean? It means you have observation, you see a pattern, based on the pattern you make a theory, and you have a certain level of predictability of that theory. If it gets up to 50% predictability, it's called a scientific theory. It's still a theory. It's not fact. There's a difference between fact and theory. Yeah, what's your question?
So if they didn't go to the moon, that means...
What?
If they didn't go
No,
to
wait a minute. You have to speak into the microphone. We can't hear you.
So if people actually...
We want to get excited by what you hear. What you say. Go ahead.
So if people actually didn't go to the moon, all the realistic photos they took are actually illustrations by people?
Not illustrations. They're called virtual representations. What's a virtual representation? They go somewhere like New Mexico. They find a place in New Mexico that looks a little bit like the moon, and they dim the lights, and they have these two astronauts. Looks like they're walking on the moon, but actually they're walking somewhere in New Mexico that has a landscape that looks something like the moon. So what you see is the exact words.
But how do you...
Yeah.
But how do you know if it looks like if they didn't go there, how do they know what the moon looks like?
Do you know what the moon looks like? So they can do anything, and you don't know what it looks like anyway. They said this is the moon.
So they just made the shape up?
As long as you're in ignorance, they can show you any picture that like looks a little dark. Doesn't look like there's much there. And they say, well, this is the moon. You don't know what the moon is. You've never been to the moon, right? So they can pass anything off on you, and you'll accept it. They say, well, no, you have to believe us because we build bridges, we build tunnels, we have intercontinental missiles, and washing machines, and cars, and AI, and IT, and So because we did all that, you should believe what we say. No, that's not a credible statement. Just because they make bridges and tunnels, that doesn't mean that they went to the moon, or that we have to believe that they went to the moon.
So in that case, all their facts, like like the gravity on the moon, is not true.
Well, they might have some idea of things that are happening on the moon. Anyway, you have no way of verifying if it's true or not. Like have you read in a science book that the sun is 93 million miles from the Earth? Have you read that? Yes, right? Now, do you believe it? No, I mean, no. I mean, you believe it because it's in the science book. Now, the question is, are you ever going to prove it or verify it? No, you're not.
How can they get out of the spaceship and take some stick and measure?
It's not that. You're reading in a science book in school that the sun is 93 million miles from the Earth. How do you know it's exactly 93 miles? Maybe it's 92 million miles. Maybe it's 94 million miles. You don't know, and you're never going to double check it. You're never going to do an experiment to see if it's true or not. You just accept it, right? And if they give you a test, how far is the Earth, how far is the sun from the Earth? 92 miles, 920 miles, 9,200 miles, right? Or 93 million miles. So if you say 93 million miles, you get an A in the test. You get an A in science. But you've never verified if it's true or not. You don't know if it's 92 million or 94 million. You see my point? You're just believing what they say. Most of the things that you're studying, you just believe what they say. And then if you get if you find a textbook from the 1940s, you'll see that the information was different then than the information you're reading today. And if you, 30 years from now, you look at your old science book, and then you see your kid's science book, you'll see the kid's science book in the future is different than the science book you had when you were a kid, because they keep changing their theories.
When we studied, it was 9 planets for us. Now it seems 8 they are saying.
Because they excluded Pluto as a dwarf planet.
What is it?
Pluto was included as a planet, and now they excluded it as a dwarf.
Pluto now.
But they included it as a dwarf planet.
Yeah, well, you see, their theories are changing all the time. Whereas Bhagavad Gita hasn't changed after 5,000 years. So which one is the science? The Bhagavad Gita that has never changed and is always true, or the moon theory, or this theory, or that theory, you see?
Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll stop right there, and we'll finish this tomorrow. Is this interesting? What do you think? Right? This is interesting stuff, isn't it? You're not going to hear this anywhere else. You know, Hare Krishna. All glories to Prabhupada ki jai.
Can I sing again, or did you sing?
You can sing. Go ahead.
Can somebody hold a microphone while we're getting that? The
Yeah, get
poster.
this words for him. So good questions. Thank you.
What do you want?
You're welcome.
What do you want?
The poster.
Okay.
I can flip to it. One more page. I think one more, yeah. This one.
Oh yeah, the word is simulated moon landing. when I was a kid, a little bit older than you, I was watching television where they showed the moon landing, but there was a little English sentence on part of the television. It said, simulated moon landing. You know what the word simulated means? Made up. It was not a real picture. It was not a real televised picture of the moon landing. It was a simulated moon landing, which meant it was just made up in like a Disney World or a movie, a movie landscape. Right?
Can I start?
Yeah, it starts by chanting Hare Krishna until he comes out. Okay. Until the pujari comes, you just chant Hare Krishna. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna.